Okay, let me see where that was. Oops. Bear with me here.
I definitely will.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to start recording. Welcome to the life-changing magic of self-forgiveness. Feel better, manifest more, transform the voice of self-doubt into your biggest asset. So let's just make sure first that everybody's in the right place. So this is a class for you if you find that people get on your nerves, or if we're honest, you get on your nerves and sometimes you're pretty hard on yourself about it. It's for you if you wish you knew you had the secret to more energy and inspiration and motivation. If you spend more time than you like to admit, wishing for approval of other people and secretly in fear of judgment, criticism, and blame. Or if you're spending money on a lot of mentors and accountability programs, and that works, but it never seems to last once the program is over. So we're going to cover a few things today. We're going to cover why you're really that exhausted, what the secret is to more energy, inspiration, and motivation, how other people really are your greatest teachers, what's really behind approval seeking that people are not talking about right now, why negative self-talk is so not normal, and what you can do about it. And then the key to success beyond limits, it's your inner mentor, and I'm going to talk to you about how you can access her. So after today, you are going to know actually how to use irritating people to your advantage. You're going to know how to actually use them as your teachers. You're going to stop beating yourself up in your head, and you're going to be able to access the wise mentor inside you. You're going to learn how to magnify your creativity, your confidence, your energy, and your motivation. I'm going to teach you simple mindset tweaks that you're going to be able to use right away to deal with self-doubt and to feel better and to stop hiding. And I'm going to teach you a one-of-a-kind process to end shame, the shame cycle, to stop self-medicating, approval-seeking, and or blaming yourself or other people. And by the way, I learned this tool, or this tool came to me through the inspiration that I was able to access through the exact process I'm going to teach you today. So let me talk a little bit about who I am. My name's Amy Pearson, and I am a recovering approval addict with the occasional relapse, although I will say that that is fewer and far between thanks to the forgiveness process that I'm going to be teaching you today. I'm a master certified life coach. I've been a coach for 10 years. I've been master certified for 8. I am a trainer on behalf of Martha Beck in her training certification program. I was owner of Live Brazen. So sometimes you see me there, but I am now owner of Being Amy, the blog, and I've been featured in places like Huffington Post, on Maria Shriver's blog, in Martha Beck's blog. I've participated in some high profile events like Recovery 2.0 with Tommy Rosen. I was interviewed on Awaken Radio, which at the time was the #1 spirituality podcast on the internet. I typically average about 15 talks per year. Last year, I decided to take a break. I wrote a book. It's a memoir called Forgiving Amy. And I'm still in the process of finishing that. So this is the year, 2020. But in the process of writing this book, I created a healing process called the forgiveness process that I'm really excited to share today. I've never shared it before. This is the first time through this class that I'm going to be sharing it. So I'm going to give you as much as I can today. And we only have an hour. So I promise you, though, at the end, I will share some resources for how you can take it further if that sounds like something you'd like to do. And if you do stay till the end, I'm going to share with you some fun bonuses. Oh, my light just turned off. That was strange.
Uh-oh.
Very strange. Okay, so Little Women, the book Little Women, what does that have to do with anything? So it's a funny story. When I was little, my grandmother, there she is, Grandma Margie, she gave me this book as a gift. Little Women was her favorite book, and she gave it to me. And the thing is, I was actually named Amy after Amy Marsh, one of the characters in the book. And so I was really excited to get this book because my grandmother was very shy. I didn't really know her that well. I sort of saw it as a way to bond with her. So I got home and I started to read it, but the problem was I never got past the first chapter. And the reason why is because I was so irritated that I was named after Amy. I just felt like she was the most annoying character in the book. And so I never actually read the book. And I decided, since I was working on my own memoir, that it was probably time for me to actually read the book, to finish the book. So I did, and the same thing. I just kept getting more and more irritated by Amy, and not only Amy, but the rest of her sisters. And so I realized, though, and one of the passages that really got me was the one that goes, Amy, though she was the youngest, was a most important person, in her own opinion at least. And I just thought, oh my gosh, just so conceited, so self-absorbed. And so what I realized, and this sort of came to me just kind of like a bolt of lightning, is that every time that I felt irritated by Amy, in that moment I was pushing away something about myself. Um, I was judging Amy for being self-absorbed so that I could deny that part of myself that was actually pretty self-absorbed. And so all the things I judged in Amy and her sisters were opportunities for me. They were opportunities for me to see the truth about myself, to accept myself, and to forgive myself, to absorb the shadow into the light and become a whole human being, just like I was when I came into this world. We come into this world whole. So what I realized is this was not actually a gift for me as a child. This was actually a gift for me as an adult. This was a gift from my grandmother to help me forgive Amy, the Amy in Little Women, but also Amy, the one that is teaching this class right now. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But it was through the book and through this gift from my grandmother that I came upon the forgiveness process. It's a pretty cool thing. So anyway, forgive. What do I mean by forgive? So if you look it up in the dictionary, to forgive is to stop feeling angry or resentful at someone for an offense, a flaw, or a mistake. Now, there's been a lot of research on forgiveness in general, and basically it just improves health, it improves emotional well-being. This is all just research-based stuff. So what about self-forgiveness? So I argue that on top of all of the health and emotional benefits that you see here, you are all, when you're willing to forgive yourself, all kinds of amazing things happen. So first of all, and I'm going to get into that later, but first of all, what do you need to forgive yourself? So there are a few things that you can kind of think about when you're thinking about, well, do I even need to forgive myself? I mean, first there's the obvious stuff, like, do you ever wish you could be more like someone else? Do you ever look in the mirror and not like what you see? Do you ever feel like you need to prove yourself? Do you beat yourself up for making a bad choice? Do you say or do things you're ashamed about later? Do you have regrets? Are you ever wishing you were different? Do you wish you were smarter or better at business or a better mom, more successful? All of that. So those are some indicators that if you answered yes, then chances are you do need to forgive yourself. Now, there is this other powerful indicator that self-forgiveness is in order that often we overlook, and that is Do you get triggered by other people? So I am going to break this down for you. But first of all, you need to know that the forgiveness process works with any self-development tool or healing modality. It's just something that you can add to all of those other tools in your toolbox. And thanks to other people, there are all kinds of opportunities to use it. Every time you use it, you benefit from it. So here are some of the benefits to self-forgiveness that you can add on top of what we talked about in terms of those research-based results that have been found for forgiveness in general. I'm going to put my glasses on here. Oops, they're a little dirty. So first of all, you can count on stop wasting time and energy consumed by that inner voice, you know, the one, that judgmental voice that rejects, and learn to mentor yourself. You can stop wasting time and energy compensating for perceived flaws. You create space for genuine inspiration. This is based on integration of the self, not based on a self fragmented by self-loathing. You're creating the possibility to achieve genuine success based on that solid foundation of self-love. It's not the striving and the I need to prove myself and I need to be better because I am less. It's coming from a solid foundation of self-love. You can access an inner mentor, the best mentor that you've ever wished for, and it doesn't go away. She's always there. And you can heal yourself, and in the process, this is my favorite part, you're creating a more compassionate home. You're creating a more compassionate community and a more compassionate world, which is what we need right now. Okay, why? Oh, okay. So before we can talk about the forgiveness process, we can't not talk about shame. All of our favorite shame researcher, Brene Brown, she says, if you put shame in a petri dish, it needs secrecy, silence, and judgment to grow exponentially. The root of the word shame is to cover, and that is what we do, okay? And so let's talk about that. Okay, so this is a picture of me. This is a picture of me from probably, I would say, about 7 or 8 years ago. Here I am with my Kir Royale, and I just purchased that black tube dress, and I'm about to eat a really fine meal. And, you know, nothing in and of itself is bad about that. But what we do when we cover shame is we buffer. And this is a term I learned from Brooke Castillo. Basically what it means is that we try to distract ourselves or escape shame through instant gratification sources of pleasure. So you can see here from this picture, those are my top 3. I've been booze free now for 6 years, over 6 years, but I'm still prone to the occasional buffering with chocolate malt balls. But these are some ways that we buffer. There are lots of other ways that we distract ourselves from the pain of shame, right? Through activities that temporarily create relief, but ultimately create more shame, which then we have to cover up, right? Again, so it creates this vicious shame cycle. The other thing that we do to cover up shame is we judge ourselves, right? There's that voice, right? The voice that likes to beat the crap out of us in our heads. We deny, and this is really the crux of it, is that we deny it by putting it onto other people. And so Brene says, oops, I'm getting some feedback. Okay, I think we're good. Brene says we judge people in areas where we are the most vulnerable to shame. So this is where things can get out of hand. This is where things get tricky, right? Because this is how things escalate, is that we try to, like, what am I gonna say here? We try to distract or deny our shame. We bury it deep down. And then what we do is we'll put it on people outside of ourselves. We reject, we blame, and then we can get into things like abuse. So this is where that us versus them comes in. And this is where we start to see things like road rage or verbal abuse or, you know, all the nastiness of the human condition. And we're seeing a lot of it right now in our world. And then the worse our behavior, the more we try to distract ourselves from it by creating excuses or justifications for it, by continuing to blame the people outside of ourselves. And this creates that shame cycle again. And so we have a whole mess of a shame cycle going on right now in ourselves often, and in other people, and in our world. So the truth about approval addiction, and this is something that I didn't actually realize. I'm someone who self-identifies as a recovering approval addict with the occasional relapse. And one of the things that I didn't realize is that it wasn't so much that I was afraid of other people and what they might think about me. It was more that I was afraid of what I think of me. It's my own thoughts about myself, because people are mirrors. And so, for most of my life, I've really had this obsession with getting other people to approve of me, and also this obsessive fear of the judgment, the criticism, and the blame. And underneath sort of this, what I call addiction to approval, is this shame that we've talked about. But it's really that it wasn't me being afraid of what they would see. It was more that if they didn't see me in a positive light, then I couldn't see myself in a positive light. If they rejected me, then my worst fear was confirmed, right? My inner shame was confirmed. I was reminded of it. I was reminded of it, and I could come to the conclusion that there are parts of me that weren't fit for human consumption, that I was unlovable, that I was unworthy. So this addiction to approval, not so much a fear of what other people think, it's more a fear of our own thinking. If they like me, I can like me. If they don't like me, I don't like me. So this approval, this obsession for approval, is really just a cry for self-love. It's a cry for self-understanding and self-compassion. So that fear of rejection is really just a fear of the external reminders of the shame that I carry deep down inside. Are you guys getting that? And if you have questions or if you have comments, please feel free to share them in the chat section. And then I'm going to stay until at the end, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So this is one way that we cope with shame. Then is we cope with it through approval-seeking types of behaviors. We're seeking approval because if they approve of me, then I'm not reminded of my own shame. If people reject me, then I have to face my shame, and I don't want to do that because that's painful. And so if I'm reminded of my shame through any kind of rejection or criticism or blame, then I'm going to buffer. I'm going to drink, I'm going to eat, I'm going to shop, I'm going to smoke, I'm going to sleep, or I'm just going to blame myself. I'm going to criticize myself, or I'm going to bury it deep down and I'm going to put it on people outside of myself. I'm going to judge other people. So that's kind of how it works, and that's how it shows up. So before we can use the forgiveness process to really set ourselves free from the shame cycle and access our inner mentor, we need to know a few things. We need to be able to embrace a few principles. The first is that in order to use the forgiveness process, you really have to be brave, because remember that forgiveness is really about the process of stopping that anger and resentment for some offense, flaw, or mistake. But this time we're going to stop the anger and resentment towards ourselves for whatever we perceive as an offense, flaw, or mistake. And we have to be willing to look at ourselves. We have to be willing to go there, right? We have to be willing to face our own shame. We have to be really super curious, and we have to stop hiding from it. So that means you have to put the fork down, right? That means you have to put your drink away. You have to not get the Chardonnay out. The other thing is you have to be really intentional. Okay, so like I said, drop sort of that knee-jerk reaction to buffer. Drop the knee-jerk reaction to assign blame to yourself or other people. right? Stop the finger pointing. It's a great way to, blaming other people and separating ourselves from other people and saying, you're wrong and I'm right, is just another way that we try to feel better about ourselves. It's another way that we try to escape shame. And so we have to stop with the knee-jerk sort of, I'm right, you're wrong, and just get curious and intentional about finding out what's really going on. And the next thing is that we have to be willing to be curious. Okay, start to see yourself as a scientist of your own life. Okay, so how it works. So here's my friend Amy. This is her from the most recent iteration of Little Women on the big screen. And if you haven't seen the movie, it's really good. So remember, I accused her of being self-absorbed and conceited, a snob. I was really judging her and very triggered by her. And so the process was that I stopped with the sort of like, she's wrong and I'm right, and she annoys me because she's so snobby type of deal. And I got brave and I got curious. And I thought about my own childhood. Because remember, here's the quote that really triggered me. Though she was the youngest, she was the most important person in her own opinion, at least. Well, I thought about my own childhood. My mother and father were really at the worst of their addiction. They were alcoholics. I had 3 teenage sisters who were really tasked to take care of me as a child and didn't want to, and were really just trying to survive themselves. And then I had a younger brother with some pretty extreme behavioral stuff going on. And so I knew as a kid not to ask for too much, not to be too loud, not to create any more drama, not to add any more drama to an already really chaotic situation. I never felt important as a child. And so when, this is why I judged Amy Marsh. This was why I didn't feel important. How dare she go about her world being so self-important? Right? It really triggered me because I never felt important. And so, it helped being curious and really stopping with the she's wrong and I'm right dynamic really helped me to see that this was actually a lifelong pattern for me. I didn't feel important as a kid. And so, this approval seeking that I did as an adult was really just an effort to feel important. It was really making up for how unimportant and how invisible I felt as a kid. And so this is why I say I am a recovering approval addict with the occasional relapse, but really it's few and far between anymore because I don't get triggered as much as I did, because I realized that a lot of my relapses had to do with me wanting to feel important. And now that I have this awareness, I'm like, oh, if I do have a relapse, I'm like, oh, that's because you want to feel important. And so then I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. I understand it. And so really I've been able to really recover from that pattern. And what I know now is that I am important. I was born important. We are all born important. But not only that, you guys, here's the thing. We are born absolutely indispensable, but we are also as insignificant as a grain of sand on a vast beach. We are both, because we are whole. We came into the world both, okay? And so I'm going to share with you a few thoughts about this, okay? Deepak Chopra says, we are not in the world, but the world is within each of us. We contain parts of ourselves that are important, parts of ourselves that are not important. This one is really neat. This is from Neil Donald Walsh, who happens to live in my hometown of Ashland, Oregon. I have not met him. Maybe someday I will. He says, perfect love is to feeling what perfect white is to color. Many people think that white is the absence of color. It is not. It is the inclusion of all color. White is every other color that exists combined. So too is love, not the absence of emotion, hatred, anger, lust, jealousy, but the summation of all feeling. It is the sum total, the aggregate amount the everything. Debbie Ford, she says, you possess every human characteristic and emotion, whether active or dormant. Remember, we talked about how do we push that shame down? Whether conscious or unconscious. There is nothing you can conceive that you are not. You are everything, that which you consider good and that which you consider bad. So here's a picture of me and my little brother and my mother. So speaking of bad, right? Why do we get so intent on burying this shame that we then project on other people? Here's my mom. She came from a working class background. She did not like snobs, and she made that very clear. She didn't want anybody being too uppity, right? And she was also a single mother for many years. She had three, my older sisters were really, she was taking care of them on her own paycheck, all by herself. She did not like people being lazy, right? She was a hard worker and she did not appreciate laziness. She was also an introvert. She was a very introverted woman, but she had a lot of appreciation for people who were charismatic and funny. And that's one of the reasons why she married my dad. He was all of that. And so I picked up on these messages as a kid. It's not okay to be too uppity. You have to work your ass off, right? And you have to be charming, right? Because those are the things that my mother, who was really my person, she was the one who taught me how to be. She was my example. I absorbed the message that it was not okay to be uppity. You had to work hard and you had to be charming and charismatic to be valuable in this world. And so those are the things that I internalized as good. And then I internalized that it was bad to be lazy, that it was bad to be too uppity, that it was bad to be quiet and introverted and shy and want time to yourself. And so that's what happens, you guys, is we all come from these little family units, right? We all have people as children that we learn from, and that we internalize messages about what's good, what's fit for human consumption, and what's not. And then as children, we learn that we possess parts that are not fit for human consumption based on, what our family of origin says, based on maybe what our church says, based on our, peers, our colleagues. I'm going to mute some of you because I'm hearing some background noise. If you help me out, if you're not muted, go ahead and mute yourself. So, we pick up on these messages all around us from the television sets, right? From our peers who learn it from their parents. And then we decide there are parts of us that are okay, and there are parts of us that are not. But remember, you guys, we have it all inside of us. And so what happens to those parts of us that we learn are not fit for human consumption? This is what happens. We become fragmented. We hide those parts of ourselves away. So I think of it sort of like a helium balloon. It's like, how much energy would it take to hold a helium balloon underwater for 40 years, 30 years, 20 years, 10 years? Then multiply all those helium balloons, right? These are all the traits that you learned about yourself that you possess that somehow you deem unworthy, that you need to hide away. You are hiding a whole balloon, a whole bouquet of balloons underwater. Can you imagine how much energy that takes? What do you think that is doing to your creativity? What is that doing to your vitality? What is that doing to your health and to your motivation? So that is what we're doing, you guys. And so the forgiveness process is about letting it all go, letting those balloons be balloons and be free. So we're gonna free your balloons. Okay, so here's how it works. You should have received this, which, by the way, this beautiful handout was designed by Janet Pashley, who's, I spied her on the call. I'm not sure if she's still here, but she is my designer, and she is responsible also for all of my brand and all my design, and she's fabulous. So this is a handout that kind of breaks it all down. And so you can have this and you can refer to this as I'm teaching it. But basically the way it works is it starts out with you feeling, write this word down, it's super scientific, crappy. Okay, so if you're feeling crappy, you need to get curious about it, right? We're going to be brave, we're going to be intentional, and we're going to be curious, and we're going to wonder, okay, what's going on? I'm feeling crappy. You ask yourself, is it because I'm triggered by someone else? Sometimes it's not. Okay, so if the answer is no, you're not actually triggered by someone else. What you want to do is you want to put the fork down. Don't go out and buy the chocolate malt balls. Okay, get curious. So this is, chances are underneath that feeling of crappiness, there is something going on, something about yourself that you are pushing away. There's some balloon there that you are holding underwater. Okay, and sometimes it's obvious and sometimes not so much. So some of you may know that a couple weeks ago, my beloved dog passed away. I'm not gonna cry, but my dad called. He's a dog lover, and he wanted, and I really didn't want to talk to him. I didn't really want to talk to that many people, because I wasn't ready. But I knew, especially I didn't want to talk to my dad, because I knew that the first thing he was going to say to me was, you need to go out right away and buy another dog or get another dog. And that just didn't feel like something that I wanted to do. And it wasn't advice that I wanted to hear. And so sure enough, I waited a week, and then I finally called him back. And the first thing he said was, you need to go and you need to go get another dog. That's the solution to your grief. And I was really super triggered when I got off the phone. He wasn't nice about it either. He was really demanding about it, like go do it sort of deal. And I was really triggered by that. And it would have been really easy for me to be like, oh my gosh, my dad is such an asshole, typical of my dad. This is the way he is, and just go and, eat chocolate malt balls. But instead, I got curious about it. And I asked myself, okay, this is, oh, you know what? I'm sharing the wrong friggin' story. This is when you're triggered by someone else. So I'm going to share with you when you're not triggered by someone else, and you can keep that one. Hold on to that story, because we're going to get to that one in a minute. Okay, so that when you're not triggered by someone, and then sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's something that you do. So I had written a couple days ago, I had written about a really bad day that I had, where I forgot a meeting, and I was so sure that it wasn't that day that I sent the babysitter home. I was so sure. And then sure enough, I actually had the meeting that day, and I stood up the person I was supposed to meet with. And then on the very same day, I lost my keys, which were in my pocket, and I had to call a Lyft to get to a hair appointment. So it was like one of those days. I think we were late to school or something like that too. We almost missed the bus. And it was just a shit show day. And that's an example of when you're not triggered by someone else, but you're feeling crappy, and there's shame there underneath it. And so I was feeling crappy about this. And what I realized was that I was ashamed of myself for being so spacey, right? That's nothing, like, people who know me know that I can get a little spacey. And that was a really bad day where a lot of spaciness was happening. And so sometimes it's not as obvious. So the example with Amy, right, my namesake, it wasn't obvious right away why why I was so addicted to other people's approval. That whole dynamic, right, underneath there, this feeling of not being important, right, was underneath. So that one required a little bit of digging, and it did require the help of Amy. But sometimes you're pushing away against something and it's not quite as obvious, and so then you got to start to get a little more curious. And sometimes, that it can be helpful to work with someone else to kind of get to the bottom of it. But the process is the same no matter what, whether, whatever it is underneath it. It's really just identifying the shame, and then just getting curious and intentional. And then you're just going to say to yourself, you know what? I am a person who is sometimes whatever that is, right? In my case, with the example, I am a person who is sometimes spacey, right? I contain the entire universe within me. So that means sometimes I'm spacey. I forgive myself for being spacey. I am integrated and I am whole, and I will no longer deny my humanity. Okay, so that's it. That's the process. It's pretty straightforward. Now, okay, so sometimes you're triggered by other people. I kind of jumped the gun and I was telling you the story about my dad, right? And so when other people are triggering you, it can actually be a really cool opportunity, because often when people trigger you, it's because there's shame there, and it's not easy for you to find because it's been hidden. It's pretty deep down. And so when you're able to notice that you're triggered by someone, then this is kind of good news, because it's like, yay, I get to uncover something about myself that has really been unconscious and been driving some really crappy habits and behaviors for me that don't serve me. So I hope you guys can see that this is actually really good news. Okay, and so we kind of talked about my dad and what happened there. But before we get to that, being triggered by people outside of us, here's something important for you to know: is that sometimes I in the decision tree, there's a section here where I ask you, is this if you are triggered by someone else, I ask, is it yours? Okay. And what I mean by that is that sometimes other people are just being assholes. All right. Okay. Sometimes, it's just a self-care question. The other day I was trying to take a left and somebody cut me off and flipped me off. I've had my handbag stolen and my credit card taken from me and charged. And I had cash in there, $1,000, and they stole it. Right? um, you know people are say abusive things. People do abusive things. We've got a people, there's rape, there's all kinds of abuse happening in this world, and that's not what we're talking about here, you guys. If you are dealing with some form of abuse, whether it might seem insignificant, like someone flipping you the bird on the road, or anywhere from some of the real egregious things that we have to deal with as human beings, right? This is an opportunity for you to take care of yourself. This is about self-care. Okay, we're not going to be using self-forgiveness here. So self-forgiveness, Sacred Choices by Christelle Nani. That is my favorite. It's one of my favorite books, actually. But I like to refer to her definition of self-care when we're talking about self-care. So it's in her, again, guys, if you need to, please do mute yourself. I'm going to go through here too and help with that. Just because I want to protect the quality of the recording. But yeah, so self-care is not just bubble baths. It can be, but it could be about being authentic about your feelings. I bolded maintaining strong personal boundaries, because we are going to talk about that one. So just know that self-care is a requirement sometimes when you're triggered by other people. Okay. And so now we're finally going to get back to my dad. Okay. So now the neat question is it yours? Right. So that means, can you take responsibility for this? So again, my dad, right? Go out and buy another dog. So I was really triggered by that. And I decided to get curious about it and use my own my own tools. And what I realized was that I was really triggered by my dad for being so just pushy, right? Like just kind of inserting his own viewpoint, and we're not really taking into account how I was feeling. That was what was really triggering me. And so what I did was I identified the behavior that triggered me. He was being pushy. He was inserting his own opinion without taking my needs into account. And so then I asked myself, are there any times when I could identify that kind of behavior in me? Could I find that in me? Did I ever do anything like that? And I realized that, oh, hell yes, I definitely have that side of me. I probably learned it from my dad, right? And in particular with my husband or my children. My son, he likes to tell me I'm a momsplainer. You know that term mansplaining. He says, "I'm mom, you're momsplaining again." Because I love to insert my opinion. I love to be pushy about my point of view when it's my immediate family, right? And that's what my dad was doing to me. I will inject my opinion, and I'm sometimes not very good about taking other people's opinions or viewpoints into account. And so there it was. I found it in myself. And so I saw that this was an opportunity for me to become integrated, because somehow I had pushed that awareness way deep down. And it was my dad doing that to me that helped me to see and become conscious of that in myself. And so I didn't use that as an opportunity to beat myself up in my head and make myself wrong. What I did was I forgave myself. I admitted that sometimes I'm a person who's pushy, and I inject my opinion without taking other people into account. And I use this as an opportunity to forgive myself for that. And then I acknowledged that I am an integrated person. I'm no longer going to hold that balloon underwater. I am whole. I am no longer going to hide from my own humanity. The other really powerful thing that you can do is you can journal about this. So I've been working on a memoir for a year, more than a year. And I've been learning about the writing process. One of the powerful things about writing is writing scenes. When you're a protagonist in a scene, there's some need that you have some goal, right? It can be very powerful to write about the first time that you can remember either having been someone who has been on the receiving end of one of those behaviors you're judging, or when you have been the person who is taking part in that behavior. And then you can start to get curious about what was the need that was being met. What was your goal in that behavior? Or what was it that you experienced being in the receiving end of that behavior? If you can start to identify what your need was, then you can start to see that as an adult, a lot of times we will be seeking out that same need in really not very helpful ways. This is me trying to feel important as an adult, right? And that approval seeking behavior coming out. And so you can start to find out what are some needs that weren't addressed, and how am I trying to do that in misguided ways as an adult? And then you can give yourself the gift of wholeness through some kind of symbol. I like to give myself a color. It's really just the first thing that comes into my head, or shoot myself a symbol, the me that I'm writing about in the scene. All right. And give myself a symbol of whatever that need was for me, the feeling of importance. It's yours. I give it to you in the color red. I give it to you as the symbol of a beautiful locket. All right. That's the process that I use. All right. Now this becomes really interesting, because if you're following the decision tree, then there's this other situation where sometimes you're triggered by someone in your world and you can't recognize the behavior in yourself, right? So there's an example. I have a client I was taking her through the forgiveness process. And this was happening with her, where she had a situation at work where one of her colleagues was being really arrogant. And so I asked her, okay, do you ever see that you're arrogant? And she's like, never. I mean, honestly, I'm never arrogant. And so I asked her to start thinking about, well, what is the light side of arrogance? Like, if you were to see arrogance as sort of like this spectrum of behavior, and arrogance is like the worst way that it can manifest, like, what would be the light side of the manifestation of that? And she said, self-confidence. And so through that conversation, we were actually able to recognize that as a child, this woman was never allowed to be proud of herself. She was never given the okay from her family of origin, mostly her mother, to be confident, right? It was all, and this happens so much with women, right? Don't get too self-important. Don't be too proud. Don't get too big for your britches, right? And so she had never given herself permission to be confident. And so when she saw this guy being arrogant, it really triggered her because she was never allowed to be confident. She was never allowed to express her light. So in this part of the decision tree, when you're recognizing someone out there who is demonstrating a type of behavior that you cannot see in yourself, ask yourself, what is the light side of that behavior? Because what this is going to reveal to you, and this is really cool, is this is going to reveal to you where you are dimming your own light. Okay? So that's so cool, right? Because we so often hear about how we dim our light. This is how it works, you guys. And so my client was dimming her own light. And so after our conversation, we actually, she had oh, my dad just sent me a text message. How funny. She was able, her son was like, she had this interaction with her son that very same day where he was like, Mom, I'm so proud of myself. And she was like, ah, because she realized that in her own childhood that she wasn't given that experience to be proud of herself. And so you can do the same process where you can journal about it. You can think back to what was the first time you would receive the message that you are not allowed to manifest this type of behavior. And then it's the same thing. You're going to repeat, I am an integrated person. It's okay for me to be confident. I can learn to express the quality of confidence in positive ways. I will no longer deny my humanity any longer. All right. So, benefits of forgiveness. We talked about some of those proven scientific benefits. Okay. So I want you to add increased energy, increased vitality, increased motivation, increased inspiration. No more shaming yourself, right? Because we're whole. We contain the light, we can contain the shadow. It's normal and it's okay. We don't have to buffer now because we're trying to escape the pain of shame. When we allow ourselves to free ourselves from shame, we don't have to buffer because we're not trying to escape that pain. We're not blaming ourselves anymore. There's no more self-abuse and we're not judging others. We're creating a more compassionate environment inside ourselves first so that we can create more compassionate environment outside of ourselves. How fucking cool is this? I'm so excited. All right. So the last piece of this is that, you know, so often in self-development circles, we hear about, oh my gosh, it's totally normal to, you know, to have an inner critic. Okay. Well, I'm done with that. You know, I'm done normalizing that, you guys. It's not normal. You know, this is a learned behavior. I hear my mother-in-law do it. She will say, oh, Diane, you're so stupid. You know, like as if it's like some kind of virtue to be calling yourself stupid out loud. This is something that we learn. We learn it from the women that came before us. It is not virtuous to diminish yourself, whether that's inside your head or whether you're verbalizing that outside of yourselves. And remember that blame, whether you're blaming someone for being wrong so you can be right, or whether you're inside your head blaming the shit out of yourself, it is not normal. It is a learned behavior. You need to set a boundary with your own damn self, okay? That is one of the attributes of self-care that Christelle Nani talks about. And we need to start now on ourselves so that we can stop this type of behavior. We need to stop normalizing it. So the last piece of the forgiveness process is about channeling your inner mentor, okay? I know a lot of you guys, just like I have, spend big bucks on mentors, right? In the self-development world, there's all kinds of people that we look to for inspiration and guidance. Guess what, guys? That's fine, but it's also inside of you. I want you to think about this. Who is the best mentor you've ever had? Or who is someone that you would like to be your mentor? Think about what makes that person fantastic. For me, I really love someone who sees the best in me, knows what I'm capable of, does not let me off the hook, and doesn't take any shit, but in a fun, kind of compassionate way, right? This person, I know they love me, but they're not going to take any shit. Okay, so that's an example of my, ideal mentor. Guess what? That's you. What you're doing when you're identifying the attributes of your favorite mentor is that you are projecting your light, just like you project your shadow, you guys. You're projecting your own light onto that person. Remember, the saintly and the cynical, the divine and the diabolical, the courageous and the cowardly. These are all aspects that lie dormant in us. So what you are doing right now is you are identifying your own light, and you can access your inner mentor every time you decide to stop buffering and to drop the you're right, you're wrong paradigm and get curious about what's going on. Whether you're triggered by someone else or you're pushing away something inside yourself, you are dropping the shame. That means that you are no longer willing to take shit from your inner critic, and you're going to start to bring in the voice of the inner mentor. You start to ask yourself, what would she say? How would she help you to work through this difficulty? How would she help you learn from your mistakes? How can she help you express yourself in a more positive way? How cool is this, you guys? She's within you. And I can tell you that I have, through this process that I'm teaching you right now, I have had more energy, more motivation, the best ideas, and much more fun. Because you know what happens when you allow yourself to identify the shadow. It was funny. I was talking to my husband. I was like, I was super into this. I was like so inspired. And I was like, babe, what happens when you absorb the shadow into the light? And he was like, I thought it was like a super scientific question. He's like, well, the light is what's left. And I was like, oh yeah. And that is what happens, you guys, when you allow yourself to drop the shame cycle and you allow yourself to be an integrated person who possesses both the shadow and the light. Guess what? You're left with the light. That means more energy, more motivation, more inspiration. So I told you I would share resources for how to take this further. I want to share with you guys a course that is really, I call it my flagship course, because it's really, I teach 3 different courses, but this one is really the foundation to all of my work. And I'm sharing it kind of at the end of the forgiveness process, because I really feel like this is going to be something that will be an amazing resource if you identify yourself as someone who has been sort of stuck in sort of the approval seeking, rejection avoidance behavior. We know that it's because you're coping with shame. But what happens is when you're doing the approval seeking, when you're doing the rejection avoiding, you're doing it in a way that those behaviors start to become habitual. So we know how habits are. In order to break a habit, you need to bring in another kind of habit. And so I want to share with you this course that I created. It's called Being You Uncensored, and it's for those of you who feel like you could use a resource to get yourself out of sort of that approval-seeking type of behavior, the habitual habit of it. It's also for you if you need an infusion of courage, right? Because we talked about doing forgiveness work really is about being courageous. It's not easy to go there. I acknowledge that. And so this kind of work does require, whoops, I got a bug. It does require courage. It does require you to be out of sort of that pattern of addiction, approval addiction. And that is really how I see it, as an addiction. So yes, we've talked about that. So approval addiction is really this, we talked about, it's this desire for approval, or it's this desire to avoid rejection, also that we can avoid that shame underneath it, right? And then the behaviors that we do in order to get approval or to avoid rejection become habitual. And it looks different for every person. So for me, it was a lot of gold star chasing, right? Because I wanted to feel important. But that doesn't show up the same for everybody. Sometimes it's about being the martyr. Sometimes it's about not speaking up and being invisible. Sometimes it's about being the one who judges first before other people can judge you. It's all going to show up differently. And so we're going to unpack that in this course, how that's showing up for you. And also more about courage. The reason sometimes that it's so hard to do this kind of work, because I said one of the requirements is courage. The reason sometimes it's so hard to be courageous is because we don't feel safe. And this is from Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. And look up there at the top is self-actualization. Well, that's all well and good, but if you don't feel fucking safe being you, no apologies, being you uncensored, then you're not going to get there, right? And so if you don't feel safe being who you are, then you need a resource to help you, because then you're not going to be able to make use of some of these tools, and we're not going to be able to get to the point where we can drop the shame cycle. So you have to ask yourself, do you feel safe being you uncensored? Do you even feel safe shining your own light, right? Because a lot of the forgiveness process, a lot of this work is not just identifying your shadow, but it's identifying your light. And, sometimes we're like, I don't want to shine too bright because someone's going to stamp me down, right? I don't want to shine too bright because someone's going to criticize me. I don't want to have that much responsibility. There's all kinds of reasons why it can be just as scary to do shadow work as it is, or to do light work as it is to do shadow work. So, these are a few things that some people who identify or who have issues around approval, sometimes, these are some of the ways that it can show up. Sometimes it's it's like feeling like a fraud. Sometimes you do that thing where you rehearse what you're going to say before you go into situations, or you mentally go over things like that perseveration, right? Finding ways you could do or say if could have done things differently. It's like that second guessing cycle. Or you're keeping your opinions to yourself, especially around, people where you don't have the same opinion, right? You're not letting your voice come out. You don't like to ask for help. You just rather handle everything yourself. And so you're exhausted, right? Because you don't want to hear the word no, because that will trigger your shame, right? Any kind of rejection will trigger the shame. That'll get you into that shame cycle, the buffering and the blaming. You are working really hard trying to make sure everybody else is happy. Well, guess what? That's impossible. And that's probably really exhausting for you. Or you're constantly trying to achieve so that others will be impressed by your accomplishments and you'll feel fucking important. There's Amy Pearson right there. That was my pattern. Or you're stuck because you're afraid you might fail. And if you fail, then you're vulnerable to rejection, and that's going to trigger your shame. All right, so it's a 7-week program. It's called Being You Uncensored. Like I said, it's my landmark program. I really consider it a program for what I call women on a mission. These are women like me who know deep down that you have some important purpose to serve in this world, and you can only do it by being who you are, uncensored, okay? You have a strong need, no matter how scary it is, to shine your light in the world, because you know it will make a difference. But to do that, you need to overcome this approval-seeking pattern, and you have to overcome this fear of rejection, whether it's from your shadow or whether it's from your light. And you have to feel safe being who you are. No apologies. You guys, I've had over 2,700 people take this course. You can go to beingamytheblog.com/BYU. That stands for Being You Uncensored. And you can see some of the comments from people who have taken this course. This one I like because she talks about me being a courage infuser. And that's really what this is about, is that you need that infusion of courage in order to be you, and in order to do this important work. The other side, right? What is on the other side of this? Can you imagine being able to speak up without second guessing yourself? Can you imagine all that time that you would free up when you're not wasting it, obsessing over what everybody else is going to say or what they need or whether they're happy. What about creating this shiny and sparkly inside so that it doesn't matter? Like, you can stop trying to create this shiny and sparkly outside because you've done it inside. Finding a tribe that really gets you and not the person you're pretending to be because you're so busy erecting this shiny and sparkly exterior. What about feeling safe being you uncensored, right? So that you can start to work towards higher and higher levels of self-actualization. And the end to the buffer and blame cycle, right? Quieting that voice of shame and then transforming the voice of shame and self-doubt and that inner critic that we all have been told is normal into your biggest asset, your inner mentor, who is there for you 24/7. You don't have to hire, you don't have to pay big bucks for. So no buffering, no blaming, no proving, no faking. You uncensored, you no apologies, you doing your unique thing in the world. I always ask people, like, what would that actually be worth? Like, put a dollar figure to that. I have a picture of me before. That was me. Look at me. I mean, it's a little bit like the image quality isn't that great, but don't I look great on the outside, right? Like, I had everybody fooled. But what was inside was this dirty little secret, and that was that underneath that shiny and sparkly exterior, I was really fucking miserable. I was ashamed. I was buffering. I was doing that abuse, self-abuse in my head. I was so judgmental outside of myself, making everybody else wrong and me right. And I was making my husband miserable. We were on the verge of breaking up. I was so sick that I could not get pregnant. I had undiagnosed infertility. I was working as this policy research intern, trying to do all this work to prove it to everybody how smart I was. Underneath, I was so ashamed and I felt like such a fraud, like someone was going to find me out. And then this is me here on the other side, the far right side. This is taken over the summer. Gosh, I'm doing the work that I know I was meant to do in the world. I created a process. I just taught it to you guys. I created the forgiveness process. I'm writing a book. I have a job where I help people every fucking day. Gosh, I have 3 beautiful, happy children. I have a wonderful marriage. We've been married now over 26 years. I would mortgage my house several times over to get to that level in my life. That kind of transformation was, often self-development, right? Like, how do you put a number on it? But I really think that it's important to think about that. What would you pay for that kind of shift in your life? So the way that it works, it starts Monday, you guys. And once you join, you are going to have access to the very first module, along with the bonus content that I'm going to be talking about. The bonus content alone is worth almost $900, or well, almost $850. But the first module is available right away as soon as you join. And then I'm going to be, and it's 7 weeks. It's video training plus notes plus worksheets, and all of it is for you to do at your own pace. But there are 7 weeks of live coaching with me, where you will receive one-on-one support to help take you through forgiveness work, help take you through the principles of being you uncensored. And also, just Q&A, a lot of, inspiration, a lot of pep talks, a lot of fun. I like to stay as long as people are there and wanting to stay with me. So there's live coaching. This is really unique. It's not something that I do all the time. I'm making myself available since this is the first launch of the year. And then there are action challenges. These are ways to actually put this into real life experience. And then there are also homework assignments that you can do that are easy to do. So this is not going to require a huge time commitment for you, but are going to deepen your awareness, right? Because awareness is the first step to change. And then there's also an online group where you're going to be able to access other people who get it, where you're going to be, it's going to be the first place that you can go, where you're going to practice being you uncensored and feeling safe to do that. And then there are also other surprises because I really like that. One bonus that I'm including, this is for you if you are interested in learning about how to apply this to business, is a course I created called The Vulnerability Factor. Why putting your butt on the line is the only way to win at business, and 4 simple ways to start. That's worth $197. I also have a Coaching Revealed class, and I call it a breakthrough session, and it's where I'm actually coaching someone around the thought, I need to appear impressive. So if you identify as someone who has really been trying to feel important, sort of like me, this is going to be a way to receive coaching through osmosis, a very powerful session. You're sort of a fly on the wall as you hear me coach someone around this topic. And then I have a series of interviews with the masters, including my mentor, Martha Beck, including Brooke Castillo, including Jackie Gartman, including Menno DeVore. This is a series of interviews with masters, just really smart, really wise people that I admire around the topic of approval addiction. This is for your success library. It's worth $197. For those of you who want to join and you're here, you're still here, I want to say thank you for showing up for yourself and for being a part of this class. This is only for people who are still here live on the call. This is a bonus Forgive Yourself group intensive live with me. It's worth $397. I'm going to take you through the forgiveness process, and we're going to see how it shows up for you, and I'm going to coach you through it. So remember, I talked about sometimes it's not as easy to identify why we're triggered, whether that's because we're pushing away something inside ourselves, or maybe we're triggered by someone and we're not seeing that pattern of behavior showing up for ourselves. So if you're kind of like, I could use some support around that, this is a group intensive coaching, small group coaching session for you. It's worth $397. So your investment, if you'd like to join me, we start Monday, is $297 or 2 payments of $177. You can learn more over at beingamytheblog.com/BYU, which stands for Being You Uncensored. And of course, there's a money back guarantee. I don't get asked for money back very often, but I want to give you 7 days to go through and participate in the program. Make sure it's right for you. If it's not, for any reason, go ahead and email me, and I will give you your money back. It's also important, I think, to consider the cost of doing nothing. So if you really feel like you could use support around this stuff, I want you to also consider what is the cost of not getting support, because there are costs around that. Maybe you're going to continue taking on too much stuff and being exhausted. You're going to keep trying and trying and trying to do better, be better, but nothing's going to change, and it's going to continue to feel like a hamster wheel. Or, you're going to get a little praise for your efforts, but it's only going to feel good for a split second, because that's what happens, right? We get that hit of approval, but it never feels good, all like sustainably. That's what it is. It's a quick hit. You start, and then like the thoughts start to come in. Oh my God, they're going to find out the real me. What if they really knew? You get, that anxiety creeps back in, because I know you're feeling anxious. I know you do that. It was my base feeling, was anxiety. How long are you willing to continue feeling anxious in your life? How long are you willing to keep feeling resentful? Because chances are, if you're addicted to approval, you feel a lot of resentment, because you're putting a lot of time and energy into this stuff, and it's not making you feel good, and so you're feeling resentful. How long are you willing to hinge your happiness on how other people see you, on how other people treat you, on what other people think about you? And how much longer are you going to be doing the buffering and the blaming and the shaming? So that's the cost, and put a dollar figure on that. So in closing, I know we've heard this before, but I just want to share it again, sort of in light of No pun intended. In light of our conversation today. So this is Marianne Williamson, okay? And she says,
two of those books, you know?
it is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, and talented, and fabulous?
You might have a book that got you on stages that got you clients.
I'm gonna have to ask, let's see, okay. Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small doesn't serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. You were born to manifest the glory of God within you. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we're liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. You guys, let's not be unconscious to this stuff anymore. Let's consciously let our light shine. Let's liberate ourselves so that we can liberate our communities, our families, and the world. I know this is how we can make the world a better place. Look at, these are my kids. I crack up because look at Joy. She's like, oh, this is why I do why I do. And I know that together we can stop the shame cycle. So again, for some of you, it might be time, you might be thinking it's time to get some help and some support. And I know that Being You Uncensored would be a fabulous resource, and I hope to see you over there. Again, it's beingamy.blog.com/BYU. I'm gonna stop the share, and I'm gonna look at chat. I see we only have two, looks like 2 comments. Janet, love working with you and listening to you. Thank you for being here. And Leslie says, very fucking cool. I love it. So I'm here, you guys, some of you are on mute and some of you aren't, but feel free if you have any questions for me at this point, or if you wanted to put any questions in the chat, or you just want to take yourself off mute, I'm here if you have questions. And thank you. Thank you so much for being a part of this class. I really hope that you can start to put some of this to use right away. Anybody have any questions for me? I mean, I see that we still have people hanging on. So are you just waiting for someone else to ask a question? Or do you want, I missed the first part. Did you record? Yes, yes, I did. And I will send out the recording. I will send that out shortly, as soon as they process it. Yeah. Thank you for being here, Amy. Yay. I've taken the course a few years ago. Is there new content? Yes, there is new content. And there's also me live doing the group coaching. So, and if you have taken the course before, send me an email because I'll give you a special deal. All right. Yes. Thank you, Lisa. I'm so happy to hear it. Oh my gosh, you guys, I'm so happy that you are having deep realizations. Yay. Anybody else have any questions for me? I love hanging out with you guys. I don't really want to leave. I'm just checking. Okay, well, going once. Anybody else have questions about the course? Questions about forgiveness work? You're so welcome, Rick. Thank you. Thank you for being here. All right, going once, going twice. Once again, you guys, thank you for showing up for yourself and thank you for being here. I love you. Let's end this shame cycle. Remember, it's not normal. It's not normal to talk to ourselves that way. We just learned it. We can unlearn it. Okay, take care, you guys.